Good morning, everybody. Since I'm about to turn 30 years old in just 2 weeks, I have decided to relive my 20s year by year. So I have been thinking about doing this series of reflecting on reliving my each year of my 20s for a long time, but I've been putting it off because my 20th year, the first year, was actually pretty intense. When I think back on it, there's a lot of negative that I kind of instantly go to, and I didn't really want to spend the time reflecting on it and reliving it, but I knew that it's useful to do that we learn the most sometimes from the hardships that we've gone through. And so I wanted to do that. However, when I actually sat down and I started to think about, okay, what happened in that year personally, professionally, with travel, what do I want to share with you guys? What do I want to share with my future self remembering that year? I realized that although there was a lot of hardship and although there was a lot of pain, and it was the end of a lot of things, including in some ways, I guess, my youth, it was also the beginning of kind of the rest of that decade and maybe the rest of my life. So I feel like it's useful to do this reflection. Again, it's mostly for me. I'm happy if you guys also enjoy it. But so here I am. I'm going to relive the 20th year of my life. So I don't remember very much about turning 20. When I turned 20, I was in the middle of a really, really bad relationship where I was really not treated well. And so I have kind of repressed a lot of those memories, a lot of specific times. I can remember the facts, but I can't remember exactly how I was feeling. There's a bit of dissociation disorder and PTSD associated with going through that kind of relationship that I need to work through. But it was also in some ways my most successful year, the most successful time of my life. So I was a sophomore in college when I turned 20. And that from September into December, I was professionally, I started working for this couple I started as a nanny, as a male nanny for their son. But I really quickly realized that I was bored. Mostly the kid would just sleep, and I kept telling them, how can I help you otherwise? And I kind of quickly became their investments assistant and started looking into the specific investment that they wanted to make in South America and buying an olive orchard. So I don't know exactly what happened, to be honest, most of September to December, but I was working for them. And I was also working for the German government at the time doing economic development research, which is very connected to what I do now. So it's kind of the beginning of all of that. And then that winter break for that investment, I actually did my first business trip ever. I flew to Argentina and I looked at a handful of olive orchards and vineyards that this couple was thinking about buying down there as a representative for them. I also, because I was in Argentina and a lot of my family is there, I got the time to go and see my family in Buenos Aires and spend New Year's Eve with them, which was really crazy because in America, my family is quite small, but in Argentina, there's hundreds and hundreds of us. And so it was amazing to kind of be at this party with this huge family that was all calling themselves my cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff. So that was really awesome. Right after that, I went to Brazil with my best friend Terrence. We went to Rio de Janeiro and we just partied it up for the week or so that we were there. We went to Christ the Redeemer. We went on Ipanema and Copacabana Beach. We had the best time that we possibly could in Rio. And then I flew to Bolivia, where I met up with my friend Azul, and I stayed with her family. And that was really cool because like a lot of my trips when I was younger, it wasn't really for tourism or it wasn't for work. It was strictly to see friends. So I was in Santa Cruz de la Sierra, like a city that most people don't go to when they go to Bolivia. But because I was there to visit my friend and just to like kind of hang out with her family and have the normal life, that is what I spent my time doing. And I really loved my experience there in Bolivia. I then went back to New York. I was studying at NYU, and again, the stuff gets a little bit hazy. The relationship was really breaking down, and at the same time, like I personally was breaking down. At the time, I definitely didn't realize, and now it's even hard to think about that time in my life or really what was happening. I do know that I was taking this really meaningful class called Baseball as a Road to God that the president of my university taught, about how baseball is like spiritual in a lot of ways and connects with like humanity and with our souls in a way that religion also does. So every week we would read a baseball text and a religious text, and then we would put them in conversation to one another. And that class was actually really instrumental in my like development of my spirituality. At the time, I was calling myself like a mystic pantheist, meaning that I believe that you can have a direct connection with God, and I believe that God was everywhere. So I was very spiritual, trying to find God wherever I could. And in that class, one week, we were visited by the governor of New York at this time, David Patterson, and he was talking about the relationship between Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn Monroe, which is kind of a like a very complicated like love affair and like heartbreak. And at the time I was going through this horrible relationship and this horrible breakup, and I went up to Governor Patterson and I told him that a lot of what he said like really resonated with me, that I was going through this hard time. And he said to me, remember that you love the idea of a person most often. You don't actually love them. And when you are in a relationship that is ending, you have to be appreciative of having love in your life, but not conflate the love with that person. And that really kind of taught me to appreciate having that feeling of love, but being able to get over losing the person. And that was really meaningful for me. And I also traveled then with that girlfriend for spring break to the Bahamas. It was a horrible trip. We like fought a lot, and that was kind of the very like end of the relationship. It dragged on for a little bit, but that was really like the end of it. And at the same time, I was building out my NGO, Trail of Seeds, and the idea of how can we in practice do culturally inclusive development, the idea of looking at development as not just an increase in economic indicators, but as an increase in quality of life that is societally specific. And rather than going into a community with preconceived notions or specific ideas of what the community needs, how can we go in and guide the community through specific workshops, ask the right questions that bring them to an understanding of how they would like to develop without us actually telling them. And so I was working on building that out. I was getting the funding from my school in order to do that, and I was working with some friends on building out the idea. And so at the very end of like that semester, I got the final funding. One of my best friends, Shannon, decided to come on the trip with me, and I like prepared to go on this journey. And I had also signed up at the time for study abroad in Tel Aviv for that fall. And so when I left the country in, I guess it was June or July 2011, it was like the beginning of kind of the rest of everything. And my mother says that when they, took me to the airport that time, they knew that it was gonna be a long time before I came back. And I really never have like come back and lived in America since then. I also was going to be writing a research paper for my university where I compared all of the countries in the East African community and their readiness to, at the time they were thinking about uniting into one nation. And so I flew in first to Uganda. That was the first time that I went to what is now my favorite continent, Africa. And I spent 2 weeks in Uganda. I was supposed to go to South Sudan for July 7th, the Independence Day of South Sudan, but they closed the border and we weren't able to get in. That's one of my biggest travel regrets because I was so excited to go to a country on their actual Independence Day. That was the last time that a country had an Independence Day, so that would have been a major moment, but we missed out. I was right there. I spent 2 weeks with a friend staying at their house in Uganda. That was amazing. I then took a long 24-hour bus to Tanzania. We spent about 8 weeks in Tanzania doing the Trail of Seeds project. It was a roller coaster of, we ended up getting kind of like conned by this con man, but we ended up in a good place because we got very close with this community. It's where I ended up still going back every year. You know, I bought the farm, I speak Swahili now. That was the beginning of all of that. And the beginning of Trail of Seeds, which we ended up doing 3 more projects with Shannon. And I remember when we left the village at the time that we felt like we had finally done something, that we had had an impact. And I feel like going to the United World College, the boarding school that we went to, there's always this pressure to have an impact and to make a change. And when we left the village, having given our grants and having helped the community in little ways, we really felt like, okay, we had done it and now we just have to do it bigger. And after the project ended, Shannon and I went our separate ways, which was really sad because that was the time where I was suffering the most from like the symptoms of what I would later identify as PTSD from the abusive relationship. And Shannon was really there to like guide me through that all. I mean, we stayed in the same room. We spent every moment together, and having her with me really helped me kind of like get through that. And I remember at one point she just said, like, we're not talking about the relationship anymore. Like, we're talking about the future. And though that was like really strict, it was what I needed. After Shannon left, I then continued on a journey to Burundi. I went to Rwanda for my first time, which I have now been back a few more times, I think 4 in total. And I love Rwanda. I feel like it's a place where we can learn the most from. And then I went to Nairobi, and I stayed in Nairobi for 2 weeks. And, you know, I ended up later living there, and like being in Nairobi at the time was this great experience. And then I was gonna go to Tel Aviv, and I actually connected through Dubai. And it was my first time in the UAE. So my 20th year, it started where I've now lived basically since then, because 3 months later I moved to the UAE and I basically haven't left. And I remember just being amazed. I had been at that time to something like 30 countries, but it was the first time that I felt like I was in a different place, that a place that actually like saw the world and looked at the world differently. And it's amazing that I had that reaction, and now I've been living here for almost the entire decade since. And then I got to my study abroad, and I feel like the first 2 years of my college, it was so focused on that relationship, and I wasn't able to live like the college life. I was so focused on the jobs that I had, and you know, I was commuting from New York to New Jersey to Princeton, where my girlfriend was studying a lot, and studying abroad with all of these like younger people my age, and kind of being in that like campus environment again in Tel Aviv was kind of like the first time I had like the college life. And that was really amazing. And it was, I don't know, it was a fantastic kind of like place to be. For my 21st birthday, I decided to go visit my friend from boarding school, Islam, in Palestine, in Nablus. So I like took a bus to Nablus, and I had the most amazing like day with her family. They gave me this huge like, you know, meal of all this food from their garden. They took me on top of the mountain. We looked down in the city. I tried kanafa for my first time. It was this incredible way to turn 20. And they gave me this birthday cake on the top of the mountain. And it was this kind of fantastic way to end this turbulent and this crazy year. And now looking back at it, though I was so afraid to do this video because a lot of like the hardest times in my life were in that 20th year, and a lot of like the negativity and the stuff that I still have to deal with came from that year. When I think about it, like Tanzania, like UAE, Trail of Seeds, all of these things were defining moments in my 20s, and that was the very beginning of it. My first time in the country that is now my adopted home, the first time in the country that would be another home of mine, where I would buy land and help this community. It's crazy to think that it's been 10 years that I've known all these people and done all of that. So my 20th year, I guess, was a hard one, but I'm really amazed that through all of that hardship and through the pain, I was able to build the foundation for a lot of the really important and impactful things that I ended up doing for the rest of my life up to this point. So I don't know. I mean, it's interesting to think that that was almost 10 years ago. Some of it I can remember it like it was yesterday, and some of it I've just completely forgotten. So that is me reliving in my 20th year. I'm gonna try and do this for each year of my life. Actually, it was way easier and way more fun than I thought. I know, again, I say this at the end of each video, that these videos are way more for me to relive my memories and to think back on, but I hope that you guys enjoy it a little bit too. And since you have known me for the past couple of years, as me now, to understand kind of how I got to this point. So I hope that you guys enjoyed that, and God willing, we will talk again soon.